Welcome everybody. My name is Michael Williams. I'm the Managing Director and one of the Senior Financial Planners with the Hopkins Group. So tonight we want to run you through what is an unusual option, but a high yield, high cash flow, positive cash flow investment opportunity, which is Class 1B rooming houses. How do they work? What are they? What are the options in the marketplace? And why is the cash flow strong? Why do they kick out so much rent? And we'll show you through an opportunity that is sort of fallen under the radar for a lot of people, but more and more people are seeing the advantage of this and why it's such a good investment opportunity. So what is a rooming house? And I think when we use the terminology of rooming house, you automatically start thinking about that Victorian era shared accommodation, almost like that property that was renovated in the block, with people living from a low socioeconomic group, sharing a house, individual rooms. What's happened though is the marketplace has changed, and what we now have access to is not just rooming houses as individuals, but really purpose-built accommodation that provides a great opportunity that meets a social need and a demographic change that's changing in the marketplace. So we're going to show you the differences between what we would typically call a conversion, or a house that is rented out individual rooms at a time, and also the opportunities for purpose-built rooming houses and why we think they meet that market need and how they work. What is a Class 1B rooming house? Well, really, the building design industry in Australia is split into two things: residential building and commercial building. And everything outside the Class 1A building and a Class 1B building is in the everything box. So a Class 1A building is a residential dwelling. That's your standard family home. So typically when you go to build that, you don't need a planning permit, you just need a build permit. So that's your typical house and land package that we see all day, every day. Under that same stream is a Class 1B building. Class 1B building is a specific building designed to be a residential rooming house, where it allows you to rent out each individual room. Those rooms sometimes have en-suites, sometimes they have kitchenettes, but effectively they're designed so that someone is renting an individual room rather than renting the entire property. So what are the rooming house requirements? What separates that from a normal, everyday residential dwelling? So it can be a building or apartment, but it's typically renting out per room rather than the entire property. A property where you rent out per room to 3 people or less can still be a traditional house. It's a traditional rental. It's a Class 1A dwelling. There is no issues in owning a 3-bedroom home or a 4-bedroom home, but only renting to 3 individual people each of those rooms. So if you think about that, if you're in a family home and you want to get a boarder in, you want to rent out a room, there's no issues with doing that. It does not need to be a registered rooming house. Once you start renting to 4 or more people, which typically then is 3 or 4 bedrooms if there's a couple in there, up to no more than 12 people or 9 rooms, that's what we call a Class 1B dwelling. That needs to be a registered rooming house, which means it's got requirements from council and planning relief about how that's designed. But effectively, that is not a traditional house, it's a registered rooming house. Typically, if we're building, and Steve, we'll go through when he explains his session a little bit more, when we're building these, the permit process, because it's quite particular, is quite easy. And we don't go through the process that if you're building something greater than 9 rooms would require a long build and planning permit process that can drag out for quite a while. We find with our clients that are building purpose-built types of property, rooming houses, they actually can have the permits done in place pretty quickly. There's different rules for tenants and landlords compared to residential tenancy. So all property leasing and residential is covered under the Residential Tenancies Act. But within the Residential Tenancies Act, there is a separate component for rooming houses. They are on a different lease process and have slightly different rules, which our property management team will explain when we go through in detail. So why rooming houses? Why are we talking to you about that? The main issue, the main reason, one, It's the simplest form of development to get into other than building a house and land package. There is not the risk of being a VCAT, running into building or planning permit issues. It's a relatively simple process. But the main benefit, the big reason we're talking to you about it, is the commercial yield on a residential property. It's a high rental return. So it makes it a strong cash flow positive investment. And for someone that's owned a lot of investment properties like myself, there is nothing better in life than when your rental return pays for your mortgage costs and all your expenses related to that property. So typically, on a purpose-built rooming house, we're talking about a gross yield of up to 10%, which makes it a very strong cash flow positive property. And even with interest rates now at 6.5%, but certainly when interest rates were lower, our clients holding these properties were making substantial cash flow. What also gives you an opportunity is to land bank for the future. Our clients that were building and owning registered rooming houses 15 and 20 years ago, quite often did these around activity centres, which is what we still recommend, around universities, around hospitals. And now over time, what was cheap land has become expensive land because that's being rezoned. And now as more and more people move around those activity centres, you can build to a certain level of height, which means the land value is driven quite significantly. We don't need to spend a lot of time on this, although we'll talk through some of the statistics later. Every time you pick up the paper, there is a discussion about us being in a housing crisis. Not enough property to lease. Vacancy rates at record lows. So again, by building purpose-built rooming houses or converting properties to registered rooming houses, we are meeting the housing crisis and providing rental in the marketplace. Not only do that, but the government sees this as a social housing benefit. So a major advantage of rooming houses, subject to a couple of rules, is there is no land tax payable. So typically in Victoria, we have quite high land tax now. If you want a land bank for the future and that land continues to grow in value, then because you're renting these properties out as a registered rooming house, as long as the rent is under the maximum rent per room, which is around $385 at the moment, you will not pay land tax on that property, which can be a substantial saving in this current environment. We both do new builds and conversions and the sale of existing residential rooming houses, and most are usually cash flow positive from day one. And it's a great use of land or an income per square metre. So we'll show you some examples as we go through this presentation of if you owned a traditional house in a suburb, and if you own the land next door and you converted that to a registered rooming house, the additional rental return and the income return per square metre are basically the value of that property compared to that traditional space. So it makes a great use, a great income return. I'm going to hand over now to Brad-Carlin Smith, our head of our property, and leads our buyers advocacy team. Chats to clients. It's pretty rare that we actually see clients selling residential rooming houses because they do kick out so much cash flow, but occasionally change the circumstances that happens. So he's going to talk through our buyers advocacy process, what we do, and what's available in the marketplace that we have at the moment.
Thanks, Michael, and appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. As far as buyers advocacy is concerned, what we find most of the clients that come to us are really seeking that extra pair of eyes and the experience that we have after 40 years in the property industry of knowing what to look for and where to look for it, and then being able to negotiate the best possible outcome for you as the new vendor. Critically, when it comes to buyers advocacy and rooming house sites, there are some specific things that we will look at, and some of those specific things will be its proximity to key local infrastructure assets. So things like major shopping metropolises, universities, schools, hospitals, key built up areas, service centres. We find that if we can put ourselves within at least 1 kilometre and maybe 2 maximum of those assets, that we find that we can attract clients to move into those properties fairly readily. And I know Lorena and Sarah are going to talk about one that we've got on at the moment that I think has only taken a couple of weeks, and I think we have one room. So as far as buyers advocacy is concerned, it's very much a detailed due diligence process where we look at specific sites. We'll look at the risks. We'll check zoning, just to ensure that when we do commit and we get down the track, and Steve will talk about it in his presentation, when I hand it over to Steve, that we are fully aware of what we're committing you to as far as construction and getting you to a finished product so we can get it full and you can start reaping the reward. We do have an example at the moment of a current operating rooming house. This property's been operating for around 3 years. It's what we call a purpose-built property, and we'll show you some floor plans and some pictures shortly. But I just wanted to go through some of the things that were attractive for this owner in acquiring the site, which is down in Seaford in Bayside, Melbourne. The net positive land value growth for 13 consecutive years has hovered around that 4% for houses. So we see that as a real steady growth opportunity. And as Mike said, when you're land banking, you know, aside from the great yield that you'll be achieving, you will see some net positive land value growth, which is terrific. The focus on area development, including new train station and Armstrong's Road and Station Street, was a key factor for this acquisition on the basis that the rail line essentially is across the road from the property and the train station is a short walk. So we feel that the infrastructure around that site was going to be beneficial to anyone looking to live there. And as a testimony to this site, we haven't had a turnover of tenant for at least 18 months. The longest person is, in fact, I think there's 3 of them in this property that went in there originally and have not moved. So it's a pretty popular spot. You can see there the proximity to educational institutions and so forth. They're all within very easy access. So this, again, ticked a lot of boxes for us when we were searching for the best possible site for this client. 85% of living in the suburb are long-term renters. So we've seen that. People who move in tend to stay. So it's a pretty good outcome for the owner. The key property information is it's about 686 square metres. It has 9 rooms and it has 9 bathrooms. So every room has its own ensuite bathroom. And you can see from the photos, and I know that we get accused of this a lot in real estate, but they are real photos. They are not doctored. They're not blown up to make the rooms look bigger. These are very, very well laid out rooms. And you can see there's a reverse cycle air conditioning, heating. All the ground floor studios have their own outdoor courtyard area. They do differ in size, and that will be reflected in the rent. There is 3 parking spaces on site, and the other key advantage to this site is the street has unrestricted parking. So for those who can't fit into the car spaces, they can park unrestricted in front of the property. And in fact, the train station car park is literally across the road as well. Here's the ground floor plan. You can see from the layout, it's a pretty good free-flowing design. There is a common area kitchen, which all rooming houses will have. There's a very good private entrance. There's a common laundry area, which is coin-operated. So there is an extra income that the owners derive out of that operation. And you can see there from the size of the rooms, aside from the room that is labelled disabled room 1, they're all relatively the same size. All the first floor, if we can go to the next slide, first floor accommodation won't differ in size, and the only difference for these people are they have a balcony as opposed to a small courtyard area. And again, the rents reflect this. Here's some actual photos of the property. And again, you can see the ground floor outdoor area for image number 1 is substantial. And same for image number 2. And of course, the smaller courtyard is image number 3. So all the residents we know, because we speak to them on a regular basis, are very, very comfortable living in this property. If you like, it's no different to living in an apartment complex and sharing a hallway and access in and out of the property. Very similar. Again, you can see a reverse image where you can see the rooms that flow into the ensuite bathrooms. The kitchen in image number 6 is well appointed. It's a good size. It doesn't need to be a huge room. What we find in rooming houses, the tenants will essentially prepare their meals, which they're required to do. You're not allowed to prepare a meal in your room. Prepare the meal, take it back to their room. So on occasion, you might find that you have multiple tenants wanting to prepare food at the same time. But it's quite amazing out of 9 residents how well they tend to adapt, and obviously people's timings often differ. So we find that we don't have any problems, which is great. You can see there's a monthly income and expenses summary. It isn't complete, and the only reason why I put this up is because up until I think it's 2023, this property was achieving around 134,000 a year, which is hovering around 300 a room. I can tell you now that that property, the latest P&L which we received this month, shows that they're averaging, he'll be hitting $160,000 this year, and his costs run at around $1,000, maybe $900 a month. So it's a very, very healthy return on a property that doesn't have any turnover as far as tenancies are concerned. Everybody has received a rent increase, and we apply a rent increase every 12 months, which is what we're allowed to do. And what we find is the tenants are very well behaved and pay their rents on time, because essentially the alternative for them to move from this property and find something as good and as comfortable to live in as this is pretty limited, because there aren't rooming houses on every corner. So that income is a very steady and a very good return, and it's actually yielding around the 8.5%, which is where we would like to see it. Of course, that will continue to grow, and as will the asset site value. At the moment, that property is on the market for around 1.9 to 2 million, which certainly supports the 8.5% annual gross yield. Oops. And lastly, here are some other Class 1B rooming house opportunities that we have at the moment. I think critically where we differ from a lot of people is everything you see on this slide is available on what's called a one-part contract. So it's a 10% deposit paid on signing, and you are required to settle the property on completion, which is essentially the builder developers that we've negotiated some very special deals with, taking all the development risk. It's very unique. Typically what you would normally do is you would have to secure the land and settle that land, and then enter into a construction contract with a builder, and then you would have a 5-part drawdown, which you would require funding or support that through your own funding. These models are these properties that are on the market. It's a very low entry to commit, and obviously you get a finished product that is, I would say, in the industry, the state of the art. And we're finding that anywhere from 1.5 million up to 2 million is typically what you'll be paying for if you wanted to purchase one outright, as opposed to what Steve can help you with, which is buying the land and building it yourself. Of course, the other benefit with these properties is that because you are the first owner, you do achieve receive 100% of the depreciation. That is obviously at a very good position because they are brand new. So thank you very much for your time, and I think we're going to hand over to Lorena and Sarah. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name's Lorena and I'm here with Sarah. We're from the rental department. Just following on from Brad and the current rooming houses that we've got for sale, why tenants moving towards rooming houses themselves. We find that as soon as we do have a rooming house for lease and we put it up on our platforms, being realestate.com and Domain and the Hopkins website, we do get inundated with inquiry just in regards to the price. So there's not necessarily a lot of people that know about them. There are certain people that actually only look for rooming houses, and I'll go on to a few points as to why. However, just based on price point and not reading through the detail of the descriptive ad that we put online, we do get inundated with inquiry. So traditional management at the moment, so high rentals has become increasingly unaffordable. So everyone's feeling it at the moment, and tenants particularly. And just with the shortage that everyone probably keeps on hearing about in the media as well, it's just very hard for tenants and renters to find properties. So we're just finding at the moment, usually winter's our quietest month. We're just leasing just as many properties as ever, and vacancy across Victoria, as everyone may or may not know, is at a very all-time low. So not just our rents are continuing to go up, same with, just cost of living for tenants, and not tenants, just for absolutely everyone at the moment. What they are saving on, because bills are included, they're saving on utilities, electricity, water, and Wi-Fi. So that's a massive, obviously, with everyone knows on day to day what they're paying for extra bills on top of their either mortgage or rental. So for a renter, for a rooming house that Brad just showed us, and the photos are obviously quite new. They've got those balconies, the outside living areas. They're very practical. They're very self-contained, and with all bills included, it's $360 a week. If you just look in metro or inner city at the moment, I never thought that I'd say this after so many years. I think Melbourne's almost close to Sydney prices. They pay $700-800 a week. We're not far off that. I put $590 a week as a traditional 1-bedroom apartment in the inner city, and that's very conservative. So, we're looking online and they're getting in the 600, close to 700 for a 1-bedroom with absolutely no utilities, and then still having to pay Wi-Fi, water, electricity on top of that. So we've put around 40% savings for renters, but they are becoming more and more appealing. I've gone to, myself personally, gone to Rooming House Open for inspections, where I speak to people and they're only looking, they'll say, what other rooming houses do you have? So they know if you've lived in one and you kind of know the benefits. Again, I don't think anyone wakes up in the morning and says, right, I'm going to look for them. But as soon as they do know and speak to people, they're becoming more and more common. And a lot of people that do initially inquire about them may not necessarily look or read the detail, but once that price, and once they see that it is utilities and bills included, it is a massive it's attraction for tenants, that's for sure. So the types of tenants, again, I think Brad touched on location. So we find that we've got a lot near big universities, being Monash and Clayton. There's unis all over Melbourne. So we find that as soon as there is one in a great location with really close proximity to a university, a lot of international students, hospitals, a lot of people might live in the peninsula and they work in the inner city, and they just literally need to lay their head at night, but it's just their city base. So we find that we have a lot of professionals that do lease the ones near the hospitals, even doctors, nurses, and workers. So I think the different types of tenants, and I think that what the Hopkins Group and what we do and specialize in our management is we do advertise on realestate.com. So there might be not a stigma, but you might hear about rooming houses and think, okay, what's the difference? And the caliber of tenants. We do really pride ourselves of running our rooming house department like we would our traditional managements, which is, I guess, the key difference for rooming houses that we deal with. So we put them online as I mentioned, realestate.com domain versus Gumtree and Flatmate Finders and flatmates.com. And I think the biggest difference there, which I will just point out, because I might just think about advertising, and that's fine. Like, it might be cheap advertising, but it's just the caliber of tenants. And the reason why I say that is just obviously our process to process applications. We have a leasing team who go through a whole leasing process. So we just make sure that, we pick and select the right group of tenants in that one building, because it does make a difference. And I think that the selecting process at the start is just a really key, important factor when you do have and share communal spaces. So I think with just saying basically they're with an agency or without an agency, you don't need to be a fully licensed estate agent to manage a rooming house. So a rooming house operator can be managed by not an estate agent, but the key difference is the way we run it traditionally as our traditional property managers pays off in the long run. So I think it's a really great benefit. So I've touched on, professionals and the types of calibers of tenants that we get. And we often obviously pay rent on time. We've got systems in place that has a tenant portal. We make sure that everything's paid on time. There's no disruptions in, I guess, like I said, in the communal areas. They have maintain the property, comply with house rules, because each tenant does have a copy of the rooming house rules. So that just differs to traditional management. And like Brad said, and he mentioned before about potential long-term tenancy, because they are new, they're in great location, they are all that one needs. We do find that the purpose-built, we get longer-term tenancies. I'll pass on to Sarah, and she can just touch on a couple of things just in regards to our service scope.
Hi guys, just in regards to our service scope. So basically we will manage your property from start to finish. It's end-to-end management from, I guess, the day that you purchase the property until the ongoing manage of it. So basically liaising with the council. All councils have different registrations basically that we need to abide by. We advertise our properties on realestate.com, Domain, all of those main portals like Lorena mentioned in the previous slide. She also touched on where screening tenant applications. So tenants will need to apply on realestate.com. They'd have to put in their 100 points of ID, all their references, and basically go through a strict screening process, which then the landlord has the ability to approve or decline. You guys will have the final say who goes into the property. Lease negotiation with tenants, drafting and negotiating lease with tenants, whether that's a new lease or a rent increase or lease renewal in 12 months' time. Lorena also touched on tenant portal. We provide a tenant portal for our tenants and landlords. Basically, tenants can report maintenance issues, pay their rent, and access important documents on their portal. For landlords, we also control the bill management, so we can handle bills on landlords' behalf, basically paying those on behalf of the landlords, and they coming straight to us, so they get one final end of financial year statement with everything on there, nice and easy for their tax accountant. Ongoing service, rent collection, conduct regular inspections, council inspections, address maintenance requests, and obviously making sure all tenants get along. For rooming houses, we also like to ensure that the main areas are maintained on a either fortnightly or monthly basis. So that's cleaning and the gardens. So next up, I'll just be talking about basically the rooming house versus traditional management. There's quite a big difference between the two. For rooming houses, the property needs to be registered with the relevant local council. It's governed by the rooming house section within the Residential Tenancies Act. The rooming house must be managed by a licensed rooming house operator. Signages such as permits, house rules, evacuation plans must be displayed throughout the property. All renters are required to sign a rooming house lease. As Michael and Brad mentioned at the start, it's also once 4 or more tenants live in the property, that's when it becomes a rooming house and is required all of these items on this list. Individual renters have separate agreements. So each renter that lives in the property will have a separate agreement. And then additional management burdens such as bill management and maintenance coordination. Additional compliance requirements are in place, such as having a certified evacuation plan displayed at the back of every door and in the common areas. Also, depending on the council, having evacuation lighting, exit signs installed, and accessibility parking.
So here's another example. I know Brad showed a couple happy snappies before, but we are really excited and proud of this example in Durham Crescent in Hoppers Crossing. Currently for lease with the Hopkins Group. Went online probably about 2.5 weeks ago. I know Brad and Steve, and they'll share their excitement with this one as well. First of all, it's probably the most beautiful facade that I've seen. And that I guess one thing that we're probably, and I don't want to take away from Steve either, but the facades on the outside, it doesn't look like a rooming house. So we've been inundated with inquiries and we've leased them all in about 2 weeks. We have one left, like Brad mentioned before, but we have been quite choosy with tenants. And I think our leasing team said it was the biggest open. They had people literally lining up at the door. So yeah, we're really excited about this, and we've just had a really, really great result and turnout, and just in a suburb where you probably wouldn't think that there's many rooming houses. Yeah, it's been very, very popular. So yield comparison. So just going on, like we've mentioned, it's 9 rooms, 9 bathrooms, 5 car spots that one has. And the land side, you put there, Brad, 630. So each room that we've rented, standard rooms, $315 a week. That's actual figures. Like I said, it's currently for lease at the moment, and that's rooms that we have actually achieved. So the 2 premium rooms, meaning bigger courtyards, probably bigger internally, were $330, and partly furnished. They were very basic furniture. I know Brad showed a clip before just with basic furniture, but it just pretty much had bed frames and bedside tables. So they were partly furnished. And the monthly yield is $12,718. So going on another one in the area, that would just be a standard 4-bedroom house, being in the area, probably the same land size. So I guess the land size here is only 10 between it. There's a 2-car garage, 2 bathrooms. So it is obviously a large home. And that's obtaining $560 per week. So if you obviously do the math on the massive difference on the yield, it's obviously very, very impressive. And I'll hand over to Steve.
No worries. Thanks, Lorena. Okay, all right. So I know we've been showcasing this beauty throughout the course of this presentation, but obviously, we are very proud of it. It looks fantastic, and it really is. It's probably one of the best looking rooming houses that I've seen. So obviously, this is our double-story rooming house that we've just recently completed. And we customize everything that we do for our clients. So whilst we've got some standard generic plans and facades that we will often utilize, more often than not, that they are tweaked or highly customized for what our clients are needing. Just a couple of other examples there of our 2-story rooming houses. Which you can see, so very diversified, and again, we can customize to whatever look or feel that our clients would desire. Next. Okay, so we obviously do also single stories as well. So just another example of a single-story rooming house, again highly customized. This was one of our rooming houses that was built up in a regional market, and you can see there again the diverse range of different facades that we can build with our rooming houses, so they fit into the landscape and the aesthetics of the environment that they're in. So most of the time, with the facades that we do build, they really do look like normal everyday houses, and most people wouldn't know that they are a rooming house unless they were told so. Okay, so I know that Brad sort of covered some of this off before, but again, just reiterating, they really do look like a normal house, and they've got a number of studio rooms within the house. Each one of those studio rooms would ordinarily have their own kitchenette, their own ensuite, and a sliding door out to their own private courtyard area. When you're building a Class 1B rooming house, there needs to also be a fully equipped shared kitchen and laundry area as well. And with the ground floors, if it's a ground floor or a single story, obviously everyone's got their own private courtyard and if it's a double story, then the room would usually have their own small private balcony as well. So everyone's got their own outdoor space. Okay, so just looking a little bit further into this double story that we built out in the western suburbs. So you can obviously see the facade there, and you can see the internals there as well. So very well fitted out, a good quality spec. And one of the main considerations for people looking to get into the Class 1 rooming house space is to always focus on delivering an environment that is highly livable and desirable for the tenants. Because if you're building a good quality rooming house that is well fitted out, high spec, and comfortable to live in, you are going to attract the best tenants that are going to pay the highest rents and have longevity of lease. So that's very important. So just to show you how this would fit on a standard block of land. So this was a 600 square metre or 630 square metre block of land in the western suburbs. And you can see the building footprint there at the right-hand side, and the individual courtyards and the parking out the back, which was effectively five to six car spots out the back for that particular design. The way that this particular rooming house was designed, if you go to the left-hand side first, and you walk in down the middle there, you walk into the entry area, and then off to the left and the right is obviously two of the rooms, and you can see there each one has their own kitchenette, their own ensuite, their own robe. As you walk a bit further down to the bottom right-hand side of the ground floor, that's our disability or universal access room. So the main differences being a slightly bigger doorway into the room, and obviously a much larger ensuite to allow for wheelchair turnaround access. Apart from that, apart from those two items, the rooms are pretty much the same as all the other rooms. And as you go across to the right, sorry, just go back one step, Devon. And then as you go across to the right, and you walk up the staircase, then you can just see it's pretty much a replica of downstairs, where you've got the additional 5 rooms. Each one of those rooms has got their own private balcony there. They've all got their own ensuite, their own kitchenette, and their own robe. Okay, so we've just gone through a double-story version. This is a single-story version of a 9-studio room rooming house. So again, around about a 600 square metre block there. You can see obviously the building footprint, and each one of those rooms has their own private courtyard that is all privately fenced off, and the car parks out the front. So the rule with Class 1B rooming houses and parking is you need 1 car spot per 4 rooms, inclusive of your disabled access car spot as well. So the disabled car spot is usually about 1.5. It's about 1.5 times the width of a standard car park. So for all intent and purpose, what we'll try and do is make that disabled car park the size of 2 car parks. So more often than not, you'll have a minimum of 3 car parks on a 9-bedroom rooming house site. So you can see here as you enter through the doorway there, the porch on the right-hand side, enter into the common area and living kitchenette area. So you've got the kitchenette, you've got the shared laundry facility as well, and some cupboards and whatnot. To the right of that is then the accessibility or disabled access room. And then as you walk down the hallway, you can obviously see the rooms both left and right. Again, each room having their own kitchenette, their own ensuite, and their own sliding door out to their own private courtyard section as well. And this is just an example of a 5-bedroom studio. So with the With a Class 1B rooming house, you've got a maximum of 300 square metres you can build within, and you've got a maximum of 9 rooms and 12 tenants. So with this 5-bedroom design, we've still got our same 300 square metres to build within, and you'll notice that the rooms are significantly larger than the rooms in the 9-bedroom versions. So they've got the separate bedroom area to the living and kitchenette area, and again, the design elements are all pretty much the same, where they've all got their own ensuite, their own kitchenette, and obviously they've got with this model here, they've got their own separate living kitchen area to the bedroom. You've still got the common area kitchen in there, and the garage is actually a functional garage that would form part of the minimum requirements for car parking as well. Okay, so I know that Brad sort of covered this off a little bit before, but you know, why are savvy investors now looking at rooming houses? Well, it's the high rental yield. So with your standard traditional investment property reaching maybe 2 to 3, maybe 4% rental yields, the rooming houses that are purpose built for our clients are generating at least 10% gross rental yield, so they're positively cash flowed from day one. Obviously, it's a multi-income streamed investment. So with that, we believe, you know, comes lower risk. You know, in a standard traditional property, you've got one tenant. That tenant leaves, you're not getting any income from that. With multiple income streams, you've got up to 9 tenants, even if they're not full, which is very, very rare, particularly with the purpose built ones. Even if you've got 1 or 2 tenants that move out, you've still got, you know, 6, 7, 8 tenants that are still renting that property. So it actually reduces your risk. We all understand the strong rental demand at the moment in and around the marketplace. There's just not enough properties being built, particularly in the affordable housing space. So very, very low vacancy rates. And the beauty of Class 1B rooming houses is they're valued from a commercial perspective, which means that as you increase your yield, you can manufacture valuable growth in that property, which you can then leverage out that equity to bounce into doing other things. One of the big benefits for Class 1B builds is that as long as you meet a certain criteria that's set by the Victorian planning scheme, you don't require a planning permit, so you can go straight to a build. Arguably, you know, does provide the highest and best use of residential land because of the gross rental yield that it generates. And one of the other big incentives for investors is again, if you meet a certain criteria, there are no land tax. There's land tax exemptions available to you as well. Okay, so I'll just go through some basic cash flows here. So generally speaking, before I get into the details of the cash flow, so the offering that, or service offering that we provide for our clients is that we take them on a journey from the initial inquiry through to a big piece around education. You know, what is a Class 1B rooming house? How do they operate? How do they work? You know, we help you determine your capacity, your finance capacity. Finance is absolutely the key with these Class 1B rooming houses. And once we've determined your finance capacity and we know what the budget is, then we go out and we help you source land, and we source land obviously that meets the criteria to build a Class 1B rooming house on it without obtaining a planning permit. And then once we've secured the land, then we'll utilise one of the builders off our panel to then build the rooming house for you, whether it's single story or double story. Next slide, Bevan. Okay, so these are very high level numbers, but it does give you an idea of where the cash flow sits. So let's assume a land purchase of around about $700,000 in metropolitan Melbourne. Your stamps are going to be around about 38,000, stamps and conveyancing. Then you've got your build contract. So the builds were around about $860,000, give or take. So it's about a $1.6 million investment. Based on the assumption of $330 per week per room times 9 rooms, that's going to generate gross rental of around about $151,000, which is a gross rental yield of about 9.7%, so very close to 10%. We're assuming here a 6% interest rate and an interest-only loan, so it's going to be around about $95,000 a year. Your rental expenses are inclusive of your property management. They're a little bit more to the management fee is a little bit higher because there's significantly more work involved. So you've got your property management fee built into your rental expenses. Your insurance, they're a bit more, they're more to insure. The landlord also pays for the utilities, being electricity and the water. So we've made allowances in that for what we know it would generally cost our owners to pay for the utilities. Council rates, etc., etc., etc. So it's around about $34,000 in this scenario. Generally speaking, you would allow around about 25% of your income to be allocated to costs. Then, of course, there's a huge amount of depreciation available with these properties as well, because you're building out, 9 kitchenettes, 9 sinks, 9 en suites, etc., etc. So that's going to put around about just over $20,000, $23,000 or thereabouts net after tax in your pocket. Okay, so for those that already own land, they might have owned land for a significant period of time. It's unencumbered. They've got no debt on it. Then they could look at then building a 9-bedroom rooming house, again for around about that sort of $860,000 mark. All the other numbers are the same. You can see there, because you haven't had to invest in the land component, then that gross rental yield based on $320 per week per room times 9 rooms is up around 17%, which is huge. Obviously, you're only paying interest on the construction loan. Rental expenses are about the same, and that's going to put and after depreciation, you're going to put around about $50,000 a year in your pocket after tax, which is a huge amount. Okay. And we do try and cater for as many investors as we can that are wanting to get into this space. Sometimes there are some financial restrictions for some clients to be able to get into the metropolitan market, and that's okay. So where we possibly can, we'll look at regional opportunities as well. It's a lower buy-in where the building costs generally are around about the same. But the big difference is the land cost. So if we assume here that the land purchase price is around about $400,000 as opposed to $700,000 in a metro market, obviously you're paying less stamp duty to get in. We find that so the gross rental income you can see is about $146,000 a year. I've lowered the expected rent to $320 per week per room. We find that there's not a lot of difference between regional, like a major regional market and a metropolitan market. So it's still significant income. Your gross rental yield in that case is going to be around about nearly 12%. And then all the usual factors in regards to interest payments on the lending, the rental expenses, depreciation, so on and so forth, and that will still put around about $35,000 a year or $34,000 a year in your pocket after tax. So still very heavily cash flowed. Okay. All right. And this one, what are we looking at here? Okay. So this is, assuming a land purchase of around $250,000. We're talking around a 5-bedroom rooming house in this scenario here. So it's a 5-bedroom rooming house. We're spending a little bit less on the land, and the reason I've put $250,000 for the land as opposed to $400,000 is that we can usually purchase land in a brand new estate in a regional market for around about $250,000, and the developers will allow you to build up to about a 5-bedroom rooming house. but they won't allow you to build the 9-bedroom rooming houses. So that's why there's a difference in the land acquisition cost. And again, it's this solution is to cater for those clients that can't quite stretch up to the $1.2, $1.5 million, but still gets them into the Class 1B rooming house space. Again, we're assuming $320 per week per room, gross rental income of about 81,000, gross rental yield of 8, some often so 9%. And that's still going to put, about $8,000 a year in your pocket. And whilst that you might not get rich out of that, I guess the difference would be that if you were to spend $980,000 on a house and land package in, say, an outer suburb in Melbourne, the chances are in this interest rate environment, that's probably going to be negatively geared to the tune of $1,000 to $1,500 a month negative cash flow. So the difference with this is that this is putting cash flow in your pocket, so it doesn't cost you to hold it. It's what I would call a sleep at night factor. If you lost your job, then this property will hold its own. Okay, and yeah, so as you can see from everyone that's presented today, we are an experienced team of experts in this particular space. It is a legislative minefield. Class 1B rooming houses, it does encompass running across different parts of legislation, being the Building Act, building regulations, construction codes, state planning schemes. Every council has their own planning provisions or schemes as well. You've got the health and wellbeing regulations, which apply to the disabled components, and also the disabled compliance, and also the Residential Tenancy Act. So it is a bit of a quagmire, but this is what we do all day, every day, and we understand how all that works. So so building a Class 1B rooming house, it is very boutique, it's very niche. It does require specialist knowledge, we find. And when you're working with the Hopkins Group, you are working with a whole team of people that are specialised and very experienced in this field, including builders that we work with. Again, it's a small panel of builders, and they're builders that we trust. They've got integrity about them. They understand the Class 1B rooming house space. They're price competitive and they build a great product. So we only build, utilise a small panel of builders. We oversee the entire project from your initial inquiry through to finance, land acquisition, the build, all the way through to property management as well. All right, so I think that's a wrap, and I'll hand that back over to Michael.
No problems, thanks, Steve. I do apologise, I think my microphone's been cutting in and out. And I should have mentioned at the start, there is a question and answer button at the bottom there. So if you do want to lodge a question, feel free to do so and write in. And we'll see if we can answer it here when we've got the team with us.
Wonderful. So at the moment so Sarah has 2 questions. One of them is for Lorena. Any issues with conflicts among tenants?
We find that because we do have obviously a rooming house division, conversions when they're sharing bathrooms and a lot of common space, like in backyards, because they're not set up like the way Brad and Steve have gone through, where they've got common ground, your own private courtyard, your own balcony. It is a different kettle of fish. We find with our Class 1Bs that are purpose built, they just don't see each other. Like someone mentioned, I think it was Brad or Steve, they're just a hallway in an apartment block. And we often say that a lot of people don't cook these days, so we'll go there. There'll be a lot of Uber Eats things in the communal areas. But unless you cook, you're not really seeing your neighbours. So we don't find in our purpose-built Class 1Bs, I can wholeheartedly say no.
Excellent. Another question is just to have a look at the current rooming house for sale. So let me just quickly go back to that slide, and maybe perhaps, Brad, we can sort of run through a little bit again, the individual opportunities that we've got.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Devon. We have a number of different projects on the go at the moment. So the Thompson Court properties, they're actually neighbouring properties. One is a brand new double story. The one in the top right-hand corner is a brand new double story, 9-room, 9-bathroom rooming house. That's a completely new construction. So they've demolished there and they're rebuilding. That's got an asking price of 1.92 million, and we anticipate completion of that project around November. You can still purchase that on a 1090 contract, as I discussed earlier on. The one below it is the neighbouring property. That was an interesting property where they purchased the house. They've retained and rebuilt essentially the front facade of the home, and they've built in 7 rooms behind it. That rooming house, interestingly, because of the size of the block and the size of the dwelling, you can see the price differential from a 7 to a 9 room, but they also feature not commonly seen in rooming houses, but most of the rooms have what we call a Murphy bed, which is a bed that pulls out from the wall. And obviously when you're not using it, you can put it back into the wall and increase your living space. So they're pretty funky. And I'd suggest that we're going to see those a little bit more in the future. The other properties we have are off the plan opportunities where we've just secured land with a partner, and you can purchase the site and the completed product again on a 1090 contract. That's what we'd call an off the plan sale. And again, that is very rare to get something that a builder is prepared to carry the risk on for the entire project. So we have one of those in Sunbury. We have a completed product that we can sell, which is located down in Baxter. I don't have any imagery for that, but that's a 9-room property. They're seeking around the 1.9 million. So you see the consistency. Some people will say, geez, those prices sound expensive. But again, these properties are not necessarily sold off the bricks and mortar or the land that we would traditionally see real estate transact on. They are sold off the yield, and banks are coming on board now and supporting those acquisitions on the premise that if you've got a property that's 1.9 million and returning $160,000 gross annual income, that's an 8.5% return. There aren't many residential classifications of property that will give you that kind of return. In fact, there's some commercial ones that don't even come close to that. So they're just good opportunities. And obviously, if anyone's interested, we encourage you to reach out to us, and I'm more than happy to send you some information about those.
Brad, where was Thompson Court, the suburb? So we just had a question.
Oh, sorry. Werribee.
Yeah, sorry, just with that. Yeah, so I asked that.
There's another questions as well. In Hopper's example, it looks great, but specific reason for showing double-story build on block over 200 meters square. Any specific reason choosing double storage on a block over 200 meters square?
Yeah, so I answered that one, and the one in regards to Hoppers Crossing. So that was just a client choice, effectively. He just wanted to go double story, like the look of it, like the aesthetics of it, and wanted to just build something that had a real wow factor to it, which I think he very much accomplished. Could have easily could have actually built a single story on there if you wanted to, but the double story, obviously being with a smaller footprint, also enabled the ability to have 5 car spots on the side as well.
Can I add to that, Steve, too? That block in Hoppers Crossing is a corner block. So the property is positioned really well on the block and has a really good street appeal. So the owner decided that a double story would look the best, and I don't disagree.
Well, thank you, everybody. Ultimately, we would love to sit down with you. This isn't an opportunity that suits everybody, but we think it is a fantastic opportunity for the right person. It's a niche market. We've explored it well. We're experienced in it. We've got clients that have utilised our services for all aspects of the transaction. And ultimately, we'd love to assess your position, see if this is suitable for you or something else that we can do for you is suitable. We'd love to see you in the office. Look forward to talking to you. We'll be sending out some links and emails. You'll see one right there now where you can request an appointment, but ultimately we'll be all giving you a buzz and we'd love to see you in and around the office. So thank you again for your participation.